The 16th Congress is hereby called to order. May I ask our colleagues to stand in silent prayer? Thank you. The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Honasan, Lapid, Ligarda, Marcos, Osmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
13 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. The majority leader, acting majority leader, Senator Angara, is recognized.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 13th Session, August 24, 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? The chair hears none. The reading of the Journal of Session number 13 on Monday, August 24, 2015 is dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, before we move for the reference of business, may we acknowledge some guests in the gallery. We have with us some local government officials of Lucban, Quezon, led by Mayor Celso Dator, Mrs. Celgina Dator, the wife of Mayor Dator, Councilor Alejandro Salvatierra, Councilor Enrique Buctil, and ABC President Apolinario de la Cruz, and barangay officials also from Lucban and from Lopez, Quezon, led by Barangay Captain Michael Flavier, Barangay Captain Maria Adeline Lee, Barangay Captain Adonis Barreño, Captain Novelita Batbat, and we have students from the Institute for Foundational Learning Incorporated, Cabuyao, Laguna, led by Ms. Azalea Reyes.
Beg the presence of our guests of record and welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary will read the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate Bill number 2911, an act requiring the registration of all users of prepaid subscriber identity module SIM cards, introduced by Senator Ligarda.
Public Services, Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
2912, an act prohibiting hazing and regulating other forms of initiation rights of fraternities, sororities, and other organizations, and providing penalties for violation thereof, repealing for the purpose Republic Act number 8049 by Senator Ligarda.
Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Justice, and Human Rights.
2913, an act exempting from duties and taxes balikbayan boxes containing personal and household effects of overseas Filipino workers, OFW, other Filipinos residing abroad, and residents of the Philippines returning from abroad by Senator Recto.
Ways and Means.
Resolutions, proposed Senate Resolution 1536, directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on Bureau of Customs policies and processes concerning the inspection and clearance of balikbayan boxes shipped by overseas Filipino workers by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
Ways and Means.
1537, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation to investigate the complaints of overseas Filipino workers on the stringent inspection of balikbayan boxes by the Bureau of Customs by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Ways and Means.
1538, directing the Committees of Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, and Ways and Means to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the undue burden suffered by overseas Filipino workers due to the following policies: random inspection of balikbayan boxes and packages by the Customs Bureau and Post Office, time-consuming process of securing overseas employment certificates, and the shutdown of remittance firms in developed countries, among others, with a view of making lives of OFWs and their families easier and less burdensome in general, and in particular what government is doing to assist, help, and be a big brother to OFWs by Senator Cayetano A.P.
Ways and Means. Ways and Means, Labor, Employment, and Human Resource Development.
1539, urging the Senate Committees on Ways and Means and Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the announcement and planned stricter random inspection of balikbayan boxes by the Bureau of Customs, with the intention of striking a balance between the government's anti-smuggling campaign and the protection of properties and the rights of overseas Filipinos workers by Senator Grace Poe.
Ways and Means, Labor, Employment, Human Resource Development.
Communications, letters from the Office of the President of the Philippines transmitting to the Senate two original copies of the following: Republic Act Number 10671, an act changing the name of Gubat District Hospital to Salvador Encinas District Hospital and Gubat, Bicol. Republic Act Number 10672, entitled An Act Granting Philippine Citizenship to Farrell Ildrian Wu. Republic Act Number 10673, an act reapportioning the province of Batangas into 6 legislative districts. Republic Act Number 10674, an act establishing the Davao del Norte Regional Sports Academy to be located in the Davao del Norte Sports and Tourism Complex and allocating funds therefor. And Republic Act Number 10675, an act converting the municipality of General Trias and the province of Cavite into a component city to be known as the City of General Trias, which were signed by His Excellency President Benigno S. Aquino III.
To the archives.
Additional reference to business committee reports. Committee report number 210, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on proposed Senate Resolution number 1540. Resolution concurring the ratification of the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the Republic of Turkey for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion with respect to taxes on income, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Sonia Angara.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 211, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PS Resolution number 1541, concurring in the ratification of the protocol amending the convention between the Republic of the Philippines and the Italian Republic for the avoidance of double taxation with respect to taxes on income and the prevention of fiscal evasion, signed at Rome on 5th December 1980, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Sonia Angara.
Ordinary business.
212, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PS Resolution number 1542, concurring in the ratification of the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the Federal Republic of Germany for the avoidance of double taxation with respect to taxes on income and on capital, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Sonia Angara.
By the calendar of ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, the Minority Leader, Senator Enrile, wishes to make a manifestation.
The Minority Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me a chance to put my thoughts briefly on the record. Yesterday was a historic day because we have taken up a bill that, in my opinion, personal opinion, will affect the well-being, the stability and or instability, and the viability of our country's status as a free and independent state. And I refer to the measure dealing with the problem of Mindanao. But I'm forced to stand up today to put into the record my observation that in the course of our deliberation late in the afternoon, there were very few senators on the floor to hear the proceeding of such a very historical and very important measure in the life and future of this republic. And so I would like to state here and now that we intend, as a part of our democratic society, to perform our job as members of the minority. We want to restore the dichotomy between the majority and the minority. And I hope that, and we do this just as a matter of duty without any intention to offend anybody, but as a matter of duty to the country and to the people that we serve, and that for us to be able to work together as a collegial body to enact laws wisely, I hope you will understand that whenever we see the need to bring senators on the floor, we will have to make a quorum call. I think this is a fair position, and I hope that the majority will not begrudge us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Enrile. Thank you for your reminder. It is indeed a welcome reminder, and for that reason, the Chair directs the Secretariat to transcribe immediately what the Minority Leader has mentioned and to distribute it to all the members of the Senate as a reminder. Thank you very much, Senator Enrile. The Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders the following: Senate Resolution 1540 under Committee Report Number 210, entitled "The Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and Turkey for the Avoidance of Double Taxation and the Prevention of Fiscal Evasion with Respect to Taxes on Income." Senate Resolution 1541 under Committee Report 211, entitled "Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Protocol Amending the Convention between the Republic of the Philippines and the Italian Republic for the Avoidance of Double Taxation with Respect to Taxes on Income and the Prevention of Fiscal Evasion," signed at Rome on December 5, 1980. Senate Resolution 1542 under Committee Report 212, entitled "Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the Federal Republic of Germany for the Avoidance of Double Taxation with Respect to Taxes on Income and on Capital."
Any objection? Hearing none. The Committee Report Number 210, 211, and 212 are hereby transferred from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on second reading under one omnibus sponsorship the proposed Senate resolutions previously enumerated as reported out under their respective committee reports.
Any objection? Hearing none, the sponsorship of the three measures in one sponsorship speech is hereby granted.
With the permission of the body, Mr. President, I move that the Secretary read only the titles of the proposed resolutions without prejudice to inserting into the record the whole texts thereof.
The Secretary will do so.
Proposed Senate Resolution Number 1540 under Committee Report 210, Resolution concurring in the ratification of the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the Republic of Turkey for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion with respect to taxes on income. Proposed Senate Resolution Number 1541 under Committee Report Number 211, Resolution concurring in the ratification of the protocol amending the convention between the Republic of the Philippines and the Italian Republic for the avoidance of double taxation with respect to taxes on income and the prevention of fiscal evasion, signed at Rome on 5th December 1980. Proposed Resolution Number 1542 under Committee Report Number 212, Resolution concurring the ratification of the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the Federal Republic of Germany for the avoidance of double taxation with respect to taxes on income and on capital.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize this representation to deliver an omnibus sponsorship speech on behalf of Senator Miriam Santiago for all the proposed Senate resolutions enumerated.
The Acting Majority Leader is recognized to sponsor the measures.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. On behalf of the Chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Miriam Santiago, we are reporting out measures which concern removing instances of double taxation, particularly in our relations with the Federal Republic of Germany, the Republic of Italy, and the Republic of Turkey. We remember the words of economist Thomas Piketty, who said that taxation is not a technical matter, it is preeminently a political and philosophical issue, perhaps the most important of all political issues. Without taxes, society has no common destiny, and collective action is impossible. Cognizant that double taxation poses a considerable barrier to trade and investment where companies operate internationally, the Philippine government, through the Department of Finance and its attached agency, the Bureau of Internal Revenue, with the support of the Department of Foreign Affairs, has renegotiated the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the Federal Republic of Germany for the avoidance of double taxation with respect to taxes on income and on capital. Secondly, renegotiated the protocol amending the convention between the Republic of the Philippines and the Republic of Italy on the avoidance of double taxation with respect to taxes on income and the prevention of fiscal evasion. And thirdly, the Republic has negotiated the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the Republic of Turkey for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion with respect to taxes on income and its annexed protocol. Your Honors, Germany is a close and strategic partner of the Philippines and remains the country's top trading partner in Europe and number 8 overall. Bilateral trade between our countries increased by 36.7% from $3.43 billion in 2012 to $4.69 in 2013. This further increased by 14% in 2014, amounting to $5.346 billion. Similarly, Italy has close bilateral ties with the Philippines and is the country's 7th highest trading partner in Europe and number 24 overall. Bilateral trade with Italy increased 12% from $512 million in 2012 to $573 million in 2013. In 2014, trade amounted to $542 million, slightly decreasing by 5%. Lastly, Mr. President, Turkey has growing ties with the Philippines, ranking as the 14th largest trading partner in Europe and is the country's 41st major trading partner worldwide. Bilateral trade between the Philippines and Turkey decreased by 8.7% from $152 million in 2013 to $138.7 million in 2014. Your government negotiated these tax agreements to encourage trade, investments, and ultimately deeper economic and tax relations with these countries. These agreements were also undertaken to better enforce domestic laws, reduce tax evasion, promote technology transfer, and guarantee that Philippine tax laws are compliant with internationally agreed standards. With these tax treaties, Your Honors, we help build an enabling environment and investment climate that is more attractive to new businesses and ventures, particularly from Germany, Italy, and Turkey. The renegotiations of the tax treaty with Italy in particular were prompted by a desire to remove the Philippines from the blacklist of tax havens, which had discouraged Italian investments into the country. With the requisite special authority by His Excellency the President Benigno Aquino III and guided by the domestic policy for concluding said agreement, Finance Secretary Cesar Purisima signed the tax agreement with Germany on September 9, 2013 in Berlin and with Italy on December 9, 2013 here in Manila. On the other hand, then Secretary of Foreign Affairs Alberto Romulo signed the tax agreement with Turkey on behalf of the Philippine government on March 18, 2009 in Ankara, Turkey. Your Honors, there are provisions within all three tax agreements that provide that all these tax treaties shall be ratified and the instruments of ratification shall be exchanged at the soonest possible time. These tax agreements shall enter into force upon the date of the exchange of the instruments of ratification. With the entry into force of the renegotiated agreements with Germany and Italy, the previous pacts signed in July 1983 and in December 1980 respectively shall be terminated. The provisions contained in these earlier agreements, however, will continue to be applicable until the renegotiated agreements enter into force and become effective. Hence, the 1983 tax treaty with Germany and the 1980 tax treaty with Italy shall apply to all tax cases having occurred prior to the date upon which these renegotiated agreements entered into force. Your Honors, concerned government agencies, particularly the Department of Finance, the Bureau of Internal Revenue, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Department of Foreign Affairs, and the Department of Justice have endorsed the renegotiated agreements for the Senate's concurrence in the presidential ratification. Pursuant to Article 7, Section 21 of the Constitution, which states that no treaty or international agreement shall be valid and effective unless concurred in by at least two-thirds of all the members of the Senate, I am pleased, on behalf of our Chair, Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago, to present these tax agreements in order for the Senate to concur in the presidential ratification to serve as the stimuli for encouraging and supporting new trade and investments into the country. Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah.
The Minority Leader is recognized. Thank you, Senator Angara.
Mr. President, before we vote on this resolution, may I know what is the utility of this treaty? To what tax does it refer?
Therefore, income taxation, Mr. President.
Well, if it's income taxation, taxes, incomes earned abroad are not taxable here in this country. Whether the earner is an alien resident of the country or a citizen. And I assume that income earned by foreigners or by Turkish national resident of the country, when taxed here, is a function of Turkey. And why should we have an agreement like this? What is the utility of this treaty?
There are three treaties, Mr. President, distinguished minority leader. Two are to amend the treaties with Italy and Germany, which were concluded in the 1980s.
Yeah, but at that time, we do not have a provision making our income taxation purely national. We adopted that concept when we revised the Internal Revenue Code during the time of President Ramos.
For the information of the chair, Mr. Minority Leader, wouldn't income earned here by Turkish nationals be subject to Philippine taxes?
Of course.
And
if the Turkish government wants to prevent them from being taxed in their country, then that's their function, but it does not involve us.
no, but when they earn their income within the Philippine jurisdiction,
They
to
are
my
taxed.
recollection, they are taxed here.
Yes.
Now, would this treaty, Mr. Sponsor, would this treaty allow the Turkish national to claim credit under Turkish tax losses?
I do not know.
By virtue of this treaty?
I have to double check, Mr. President, because I didn't think we'd
Because-
be conducting the interpellations today. But I believe
can
so. I
check
don't
that.
think we'll be voting on this measure today, Mr. President, because we require a 2/3, and I don't think we
Yeah,
we
and
have that
also,
number on the floor.
May the gentleman sponsor check whether or not income taxes paid by Philippine nationals in Turkey, how would that be?
We do not tax the income of Philippine nationals earning income in foreign countries, Your Honor.
No, the Turkish government would. We do not know whether the Turkish government would tax income earned by Filipinos in Turkey.
Well, that is the sovereign right of the government of Turkey
That's right, sir.
to tax all income earned in Turkey.
That's right, sir.
And it is also our right to tax all income earned in the Philippines. So we have already, before the revision of the Internal Revenue Code during the presidency of the President Ramos, Mr. President, we used to tax the global income of Filipinos,
Yes, sir. We are aware of that, sir.
including the global income of foreign residents. And we changed that norm and made our system of income taxation purely national.
Yes. We are. Would our guests please respect the hall and do not join us in the session hall? The pages are required to impose order here.
Mr. President, just a response to the distinguished minority leader's point. I believe the distinguished minority leader was one of the architects of the NIRC. Is that correct, Mr. President? No,
Well,
in 1997.
I was the
Yes. Principal
chairman of the
author, I
Ways
think.
and Means
Yes.
Committee at the time.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. President, we still have a global, with respect to Filipinos, a global type of taxation. So even income, that's why someone like Manny Pacquiao, for instance, will still be liable for his taxes, even if he fights abroad, precisely because That's income earned abroad, but it's still we follow the global schedule of taxation. And the
Anyway.
exceptions there are the OFWs, Mr. President.
If the minority leader will permit, can we allow the sponsor to review his notes on this point, and maybe you can schedule
They're
this
welcome, Your
for
Honor.
interpolation?
They are welcome. They should read the general principles of taxation that I've written in the income tax code.
We then proceed
Thank
on
you,
that.
Mr. President.
basis,
Thank you,
yes.
distinguished minority leader. Thank you, Mr. President. So we'll schedule the interpellations and the approval on another day when the
Yes.
required number for ratification are present in the hall. In the meantime, may we suspend consideration of proposed Senate resolutions 1541 and 1542?
Any objections, so suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2894 under Committee Report number 200. This is the bill on the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region.
Resumption of consideration of Senate Bill 2894 under Committee Report 200 is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status is that we are in the period of interpellations. I thus move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Marcos.
Senator Marcos is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I move that we recognize Senator Bam Aquino to interpellate on the measure.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Distinguished gentleman from Ilocos Norte, would you be amenable for some questions?
Certainly, Mr. President. I yield to the gentleman from Tarlac.
Yes, Mr. President, before I go into some specific provisions, I would like to ask regarding the major differences between what we have now, which is what we call the BL bar, and the original ARM law. If I'm not mistaken, the sponsor looked at the ARM law also as a basis for the substituted bill. So maybe just as a starting question, Mr. President, we can ask, what are the significant differences between the ARM law and the BL bar, which is what we are discussing today?
Mr. President, the gentleman is correct. We took guidance from especially our Republic Act 9054. In that, one of the guiding principles that we tried to follow in writing the substitute bill was simply that whatever concessions, privileges were given to ARM and to the ARM government, we did not lessen, we did not remove, or we did not lessen. In certain aspects, as was discussed yesterday, the sharing was increased. The share of the prospective Bangsamoro government of taxes collected was increased from 70% to 75%. That is only one. That is only one example. But that was as a general rule. That is what we tried to follow. So in the from the ARM law, we also because the structure of government was fundamentally changed, or proposed to be fundamentally changed by the draft BBL, and so that was our starting point. So we did not, in that regard, there are certain elements that we even used the language in the ARM laws, but then in other areas we used as a starting point the draft BBL. So we can go through those if you would like. They're fairly numerous. But we can as the subjects as you raise the subjects, as the government, the gentleman will raise the subjects, Mr. President. I will explain where those the language and the concepts and the principles were derived from.
Mr. President, thank you for that answer. Definitely, and this is what we actually noticed also, no, is that the BL bar has no intention to diminish the powers already given to the ARM, as a general rule, Mr. President.
That is exactly right, Mr. President. As I said, it is we regarded it as a guiding principle because it would seem to be, rather than progress, it would be seen to be taking a step back if we are going to diminish whatever privileges are granted, or whatever powers, whatever functions are granted to the armed government, and diminish that in the when we spoke about the Bangsamoro government.
Yes. Mr. President, in that case, we would like to, well, we found a number of items which we, upon our research, seem to have been diminished, no? A number of powers or responsibilities, and we would just like to get your inputs on the matter. The first one, Mr. President, is with regard to inland waters. The inland waters was actually deleted from the original draft bill. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President, that whole section on inland waters was deleted. In the exclusive powers, it was deleted. And in the part on economy and patrimony, which is Article 12, it was also deleted. But Mr. President, we would just like to point out that in the original ARM law, there is actually already mention of inland waters, which can be found in, let me just refer to my notes, Mr. President. Section 8 of the ARM law, which is 9054, where it talks of the regional government of authority over natural resources. It does refer to inland and coastal waters, Mr. President. So we would like to be clarified why inland waters, as a responsibility of the Bangsamoro government, was deleted in the different sections of the current SBN 2894.
Yes, Mr. President. Again, in the same manner that we tried to stay within the general principles of the ARM, another guiding principle was that we did not allow any of the responsibilities or the privileges, etc., powers granted by the local government code to the local governments to be diminished either. And there is a very the definition of municipal waters in the local government code is very clear, and so there is no need in my view there is no need for us to redefine them as inland waters of the Bangsamoro. They can still be administered by the local governments that are within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. And that is talking about waters that are inland. We have, however, allow me to draw your attention to Section 10. We have extended in the sea, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region waters is extended up to 22.224 kilometers or 12 nautical miles from the low water mark of the coast as part of the Bangsamoro geographical area. This is approximately 7 kilometers further than what are allowed municipal waters. So there is a difference in that we did extend the Bangsamoro regional waters in that regard. However, we handled it differently for the inland waters, and in my view, it was the definition of the functions in terms of administration of inland waters is very clear and well defined, well understood, and has been in fact an effective way of administering internal waters. So it was my view that there was no need to redefine that and cause further confusion and a possible diminution of the authority of the LGUs in that in inland waters in the Bangsamoro region.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. Mr. President, actually, if you look at the current situation of ARM, the ARM originally had the power over inland waters, no, as currently stated. And in fact, there is an ARM fisheries code, which is currently the code for handling both inland and coastal waters, no, Mr. President. So, aside from the obvious question, which is that if the inland waters powers are taken out, does this mean that the Armed Fisheries Code is therefore nullified? No, that's my first question, Mr. President. And secondly, in my opinion, Mr. President, it's quite clear what the delineation between the local government's powers over inland waters and a possible functions and powers of the regional government. No? For example, Mr. President, in the local government code, it says there that municipalities shall have the exclusive authority to grant fishery privileges in municipal waters and impose rentals, fees, or charges. We are not diminishing that, Mr. President. The Sangguniang Bayan may grant fishery privileges, so on and so forth, grant the privilege to gather, take, or catch bangus, prawn, kawag-kawag, and so on and so forth, issue licenses for the operation of fishing vessels. That's not diminished, Mr. President. And the Sangguniang Bayan can also provide ordinances against explosives, poisonous substances, electricity, muruami, other deleterious methods of fishing. And of course, Mr. President, municipalities can also enforce fishery laws. No? That's actually in the local government code. No? So those are the powers of a local government. But Mr. President, just to share with you the functions and powers of a regional government as found in the Armed Fisheries Code, we have there preparation and implementation of a comprehensive regional fisheries development plan, formulation of fishery research and development program, establishment of a comprehensive fishery information system, provision of extensive development support services for fisheries, including the maintenance of proper sanitation and hygienic practices in fish markets and fish landing areas. It goes on, Mr. President. There are 12 functions, actually, for the ARM with regard to inland and coastal waters, Mr. President. So, back to my question earlier, will this Armed Fisheries Code then be nullified when we take out the inland waters powers from the supposed or soon to be or what is thought of as the Bangsamoro government, Mr. President?
Mr. President, actually, the first effect or the first act upon enactment and passage of the basic law on Bangsamoro Autonomous Region is the abolition of ARM. Therefore, all these codes and all the ordinances and all the laws that the Assembly had passed will be abrogated, and that is what the function will be of the transition authority, is to write at least some of the laws so as to set up the government. The reason that we re-examined the entire relationship between ARM in terms of inland waters, in terms of between ARM and the municipal power and the municipal power, the LGU powers, was precisely because of the confusion that was caused by the definition of the powers of the local governments in the local government code and the powers of the regional government. It was in the arm laws. So it was never clear, and in fact, this is one of the conclusions we arrived at during our hearings. What this was an area which, first of all, there were attempts for the armed government to implement to exercise the powers as laid out in the armed law, and this fell afoul of some of the powers that were granted to the local government, and this caused confusion. And in the end, as a practical matter, they did not impose. They no longer implemented the fisheries code fully. Because especially in the areas, as I said, that there was confusion caused as to who administers, what are the powers, because if you look at it, if you look at the administrative powers granted to the local governments and to the ARM, you will see that there are certain overlaps, and it's not clear. It is not made clear. It had never been made clear in the ARM in any of the laws passed by ARM Assembly that which exactly how that was going to function. So we took it as a clean sheet of paper and said, since we are abolishing ARM anyway, and we should learn from the lessons of ARM and not repeat them, and not repeat these mistakes, so as to avoid that confusion which we saw and which was described to us by the different local governments, not only at the provincial and city level, but even at the municipal and municipal level. we thought, well, let us start with a clean sheet of paper and be very, very clear. And as a central dictum, it was still the local government codes devolution, autonomy that were granted to the LGUs that we thought we should hold on to and work around those for the Bangsamoro government.
Mr. President, just to clarify, does that mean that you don't see functions and powers of a regional government over this aspect, no? That everything concerning inland waters, in your estimation, is just for the local governments, that the regional government has no role to play in terms of administering and managing inland and coastal waters, Mr. President?
Well, the national government already plays a role in terms of the joint administration of inland waters with local governments outside of Bangsamoro. And again, it was, if you will, a model that we tried to follow to make it as closely similar to what is a local government code. The underlying idea here was that we have to be reminded that we have never created a regional government before. And I think during this period of interpolation, I will be talking about saying that over and over again. And the reason is we are trying to define a regional government for which we have no previous examples in the history of the Republic. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to keep the regional government. The definition of it would be it is still a local government, but it is an enhanced form of local government with autonomy and powers that are not granted to so-called quote-unquote normal local governments. And so in this regard, we maintained in terms of the inland waters, we held true to the idea that the municipal waters are sufficiently administered. Of course, the national government also has the power to come in for certain in certain instances, and that is also granted to the regional government. The regional government, the Bangsamoro Parliament, can pass laws that will further define their function, the regional government, the Bangsamoro regional government's function, that will further define their part, the part that they play in the administration of municipal waters, in a similar fashion as the national government does. So that those will be presumably they will also be writing a fisheries code. So that fishery code will be implemented by the regional government. The LGUs will continue to implement what is granted to them by the local government code. The regional government will implement whatever code, fisheries code, they choose to pass in the Bangsamoro Parliament.
Mr. President, thank you for that. My only concern is that if we delete the inland waters mention, they may not have the powers to create a law on a fisheries code. Because, Mr. President, if we are expecting them to write a fisheries code for Bangsamoro, but then they don't have powers over inland waters, then that fisheries code will just be referring to the coastal waters, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President.
Well, the powers that the LGUs exercise over the inland waters are not eternal, are not infinite. The national government has a function as well, and I'm sure the regional government will find a function as well if they feel that there is a function that's needed. However, to change any of the powers and functions of a local government over their municipal waters is an implied amendment of a national law, and that cannot be allowed.
I understand, Mr. President, and I agree with you that the local government's powers over their waters should not be diminished. I'm just wondering, Mr. President, if instead of the perspective where we're getting powers from the local government, if the Bangsamoro government actually took on powers of the national government with regard to inland waters. Because, Mr. President, if you look at the Armed Fisheries Code, creating a development plan, putting together these facilities, it's really closer towards what a national government does rather than what a local government does. Because in the local government code, Mr. President, the local governments provide they provide permits for fishing, they allow people to fish, they penalize those who use explosives. In any case, Mr. President, I'm sure this is something we can tackle again, no? But we just like to raise that point that in the previous law, which is the ARM law, they currently had powers over inland waters, and that in our current version, Mr. President, this has been deleted. Maybe we can find a way to clarify what these powers are further, Mr. President.
Actually, in the same fashion as the Armed Assembly has written laws to be implemented by the armed government on inland waters, so can the Bangsamoro Parliament in exactly the same way that the Armed Assembly has done. Again, but we have to stay very close to the idea that the Bangsamoro Parliament cannot amend in any way, shape, or form a national law.
Right.
And so we have to hold that sacred in our determination as to which the regional government and at which level these laws and ordinances are going to be implemented. And I agree with the gentleman, Mr. President. Certainly, they will take on. The regional government will take on some of the functions that are similar to the functions of the national government by necessity, because if we are to put a very, very graphic description to the relationship between the regional government, and it took us a great deal of time to really try and define how this works. The Constitution is, of course, everything flows from it. Is the supreme law, and everything flows from the Constitution. Then there are the laws that are passed by Congress, and then there are ordinances that are passed by local government units. So the regional ordinance will have to lie somewhere, in terms of its powers, will have to lie somewhere between laws passed by Congress and ordinances and laws passed by local governments. Where exactly that will be is our job here,
Yes,
to define that.
Exactly, Mr. President. And thank you for your patience on this topic. If I may proceed, Mr. President, to another topic. Going back to the theme, Mr. President, of powers already given to ARM, which may have been deleted in the current version, I would like to ask regarding the power to contract loans, credit, and other forms of indebtedness. I think this was raised also yesterday, Mr. President.
That's right, Mr. President. We touched upon it yesterday.
Yes. I'd just like to get some clarification, Mr. President. This was removed from the original draft bill that used to be Article 5, Section 21. It has the power to contract loans, credit, other forms of indebtedness, and so on and so forth. And this was deleted in the exclusive powers, Mr. President, of the current version. But in Section 143, there's a line there that says, the contracting of loans, credits, and other forms of indebtedness by the Bangsamoro Regional Government shall be for the development and welfare of the people of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. So, Mr. President, considering that there is that Section 143, which refers to the Bangsamoro Regional Government, their ability to contract loans, but then it was deleted as one of the exclusive powers, may I get clarification, Mr. President, if the intent of the good gentleman is indeed to delete it, or can they still contract loans, credits, and other forms of indebtedness?
They certainly can, like in any, not like most LGUs, but again, it is a slightly different form of LGU. But certainly they can, but it has to be in consonance with the national policy on indebtedness. That the kind of exposure, financial exposure that we as a country are willing to have. So that has to fall in line with that. And that is why we returned it to the concurrent, because there has to be a coordination between the national government and the local government so as to maintain the policy of the Monetary Board, of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, in terms, and the Department of Finance, in terms of our financial position, our international financial position, including our credit rating. And again, this comes upon the point that we spoke about yesterday, in that, well, if there is no need for a sovereign guarantee, why do they need permission from the national government to contract a loan? My position is very simple. There is no such thing as a loan that is a loan agreement entered into by a entity in the government or a local within the government of the Philippines. There is no loan that does not have a sovereign guarantee, whether or not it is implied or if it is actually stated. Because of the explanation I gave yesterday, that the national government will not allow a local government or any other government entity, for that matter, to fall in arrears or to fall foul of their loan agreements, because it will affect, again, the financial position of the entire country.
Mr. President, if I may just be clarified again, are we talking about approval from the DOF, for example, or as long as it is in consonance with the national plans of with the plans of the national government?
Certainly, it will have to be approved like any other loan of a GOCC, for example. It will have to be approved by the Monetary Board, because it has to fit into their general national plan that they are making. We cannot allow. That is why there are limitations, for example, to an LGU, because you cannot allow them to go too far away. They might have an LGU might have their own ideas about what loan agreements they would like to enter into, which fall afoul of the national policy. So it's the same mechanism. It's very much in the same mechanism, and it is really just to preserve the financial position of the national government.
Mr. President, so just to be clarified, since you are the chairman of the Committee on Local Government and a former governor as well, an LGU needs to get national approval before it can contract a loan?
Well, local governments are allowed to contract loans only to an extent. The formula is calculated from the IRA. You cannot contract a larger loan than 10% of your IRA, so that you can stay within. The point is that to be sure na mababayaran.
Yes.
Because if you put yourself into a hole that you can never pay, then in the end the national government will have to come in and still pay for that. So as to not get into that situation, there is that limitation. If should there be proposals or appropriations made at the Sangguniang level that are not, again, in consonance, I'm sure the DBM and the DOF will come in and say that this is not consistent with our policy and will disallow it.
Mr. President, and again, we are just really, since this is just the period of interpellations anyway, would you be amenable to even just putting the Bangsamoro regional government at the same level of the LGUs? Because the LGUs, there's a formula for them and their parameters by which they can contract loans. In this case, Mr. President, you had mentioned that the Bangsamoro regional government still need to get approval. So it's a different standard, Mr. President.
It is not a different standard. It comes the reason that it is not similar to the LGUs, because as it's written now, is simply because the LGUs have a very a solid basis for that formula, which is the IRA. And everyone knows how much the IRA is that goes to every LGU every year. We have not yet decided how we are going to fund the Bangsamoro government. There are block grants, there are taxation, there are local taxation, all of these things. So we have to find another formula, and that is why. And as a matter of fact, I am myself working on to define some kind of mechanism, so that to make sense of all of the different funds, the different block grants, the collection of taxation, all of these things, how we put this together. And if we can, with all of the differences, because it's very different. Yung sa LGU, IRA lamang ang pinag-uusapan. Pero dito sa Bangsamoro government, maraming ibang sources. And so how we will work all of those sources, once again, is up to us to redefine. And we have some input on the subject from our economic managers, from the BSP, from the NEDA, and from those suggestions, we are trying to put together, as I said, a formula so that it will be easily understandable by the Bangsamoro government's economic managers. What kind of discretion in terms of room to maneuver when it comes to entering into loan agreements.
With the permission of Senator Aquino, just on that point,
Yeah.
we know, Mr. Sponsor, that today the practice in the LGUs is to borrow funds from financial institutions, give as a security their future eras. They're now subject to certain regulation. I do not exactly know what are the limitations, what is the approval process. Now, in relation to the proposed, to this proposed Bangsamoro basic law, would the Bangsamoro entity be authorized to, in effect, give the block grants as a security for loans that they will secure? And if so, are there limitations or are there permissions required? I mean, I'm translating what the experience is in the local government and the practice.
Mr. President, as
is
far
today.
as I know, local governments do not need to put a security on loans that they take out.
No. The creditor banks require that as a security for the payment of the loan, that a document be executed to assure the payment through IRA.
That is why there is a limitation on the size of the loan that is dependent upon dependent upon the size of the IRA. So
That's
that is just as a guarantee that in fact there will be funds forthcoming to
That's
the
correct.
LGU to service the loan that they are
Now,
that they are taking out.
will a similar setup be allowed for the block grants?
It depends, I suppose, on how much discretion we allow the Bangsamoro government in terms of its appropriation and budgeting process, because the limit for the LGU, the limit on the size of the loan is imposed upon them precisely for the reasons that we have discussed. If we dispense with that and allow the Bangsamoro Parliament and the Bangsamoro government to do so, then they will be able to do that. However, if we are talking specifically about block grants, it may be problematic, Mr. President, and the reason I say that is that these are the so-called block grants that are being given to the Bangsamoro government are of a different nature. They are not, in fact, block grants. They are a transfer payment by the national government. Because block grants, Mr. President, we looked it up. The definition of a block grant is, in fact, funds that are given from the national government to the local government to implement a national program. We have health programs that are like that. There's funding to local governments to implement, for example, TB dots. That is one of the examples that comes to mind. So that is essentially what a block grant is. However, when in this case, we have continued to use the term block grant, but these block grants are actually to fund operations of the Bangsamoro government. And that would mean that it will be difficult for them to, for example, that would be akin to a local government putting as guarantee the prospective PS payments in their budget. So this is that's why I think it might become a problem, because we assume, because when we hear block grant, we think that it is a fund that is given for to be used under the discretion of the Bangsamoro government. As a matter of fact, block grants are in fact to be used for the operations of the Bangsamoro government. And yet, again, we are writing the law under which they will operate. If we decide that we allow them to do that, we can also do that.
Yes, Senator Aquino, thank you for yielding the floor to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished gentleman from Ilocos, Mr. President, remember before we had talks that we wanted to specify where the block grant would go, that some would go to education, to health. I think that had been talked about in previous times, maybe not formally, but definitely informally. When we talked about that, Mr. President, that X% should go to education, X% should go to health, weren't we referring to the block grant? Or were we referring to another budget?
We were referring at that time just to the budget, wherever the sources were. If they were from taxation, if they were from fees, if they were from the block grant. But in conception, the block grant has actually been conceived as funding for the operations of the Bangsamoro government.
All right. Actually, Senator Recto here mentioned also the Special Development Fund.
That is exactly what it is. That is the Social Development Fund, which is 20% of the budget, is a mandated appropriation to the local Sangguniang. After PS, there is the Social Development Fund, there is the Calamity Fund. These are the mandated funds that every Sangguniang has to put aside. That is why local governments are complaining, is that after all the mandated appropriations, there's nothing left for our own initiatives. That's why the discussion on enlarging the ERA is always constantly going on.
Mr. President, now maybe just as a final point on this provision, some local governments actually have used their yearly funding for education to borrow money, spend largely on a problem. For example, building new schools. No, instead of paying it off, doing 100 at a time every year, they borrowed money, built 1,000, and then used the yearly budget to pay off the loans. No? And thereby they solved a problem that would have been solved in 10 years. They solved it in 1 year. So we're saying the Bangsamoro regional government technically could do that, but they would need approval from the national government. That's the difference, Mr. President. Just to be clear. So they could do that, but then in what you had stated earlier, they still need approval from a national agency.
There is still the review function of the DBM.
Definitely, Mr.
And
President.
if an LGU decided to do as you had described, and that is a way of multiplying and accelerating the process, then if it can be shown that it still falls under the limit of the 10% ERA, then it is going to be allowed. The question is not so much whether or not they will be allowed, or it is more whether or not we can allow them to potentially get into a situation where the national government is going to have to come in with major funding assistance just to be able to make sure that our credit rating, our national financial position is consistent with national policy. And the way that is done in local government, because the development fund, the 20% development fund, as a matter of fact, although there are specified sectors which the money has to be spent in, such as health, education, peace and order, how much of the 20% development fund is left to the discretion of the Sangguniang? So, if I was the governor or the mayor or the local chief executive, and I decided to put more monies into health, for example, I could diminish the monies that are being put to education. In other words, a larger percentage of the 20% development fund. So it is still under the discretion of the local government unit. So that I believe, if we decide that is what we want to do, in terms of defining the appropriated, the mandated appropriations, then the Bangsamoro government will be allowed to do exactly the same as a local government unit.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. And I leave that point. Thank you for your patience in all of these questions. Mr. President, I'd also like to discuss Article 12, Section 165 on natural resources. Mr. President, I'd just like to point out that it seems that this provision regarding strategic minerals was lifted from the ARM law,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President. But we'd just like to inform the distinguished gentleman that in the 1996 final peace agreement with MNLF, and this was led by then Chairman Nur Miswari, there was a concern regarding what is strategic and non-strategic natural resources, Mr. President. And again, just going back to the theme of we're trying to improve the ARM and trying to make sure that we're not copying the mistakes of the past, at the same time moving forward. I'd just like to point out, Mr. President, and get your comments on this, that in 1996, MNLF Chairman Nur Miswari, citing the ARM law, said that there was a problem, or that the terms strategic and non-strategic were a little problematic because they're not defined by law. So, firstly, Mr. President, if I could get your comment on that. And secondly, maybe as a suggestion, maybe we can further clarify what we mean by strategic and non-strategic minerals and natural resources, Mr. President.
The definition, the guide that we use is that for a strategic mineral is one that it can potentially be used for generation of power, because that is that becomes of national significance. There was another category of strategic minerals, that which have implications on national security. And the reason that that category had to be created is because there is mention of uranium, and that is certainly the mining and the distribution and the use of uranium certainly has implications on national security. So, very simply, it is all minerals that could potentially be used for the generation of power for the entire country, and also all minerals that may have implications on national security. Those are the strategic minerals.
Right. Mr. President, maybe we can later on in the period of amendments just clarify what exactly we mean, no? Also because I think petroleum and other fossil fuels are technically not minerals, no? So maybe we can just clarify the intent that the author has regarding the usage of these terms.
Any language that will improve the clarity of the law certainly would be welcome. I do not think that we are at cross purposes in terms of principle when it comes to that to those sections.
Mr. President, also to clarify, since we're on the topic already, in Section 22, Item 11, we mentioned that the Bangsamoro Regional Government shall have authority to regulate power generation. So we'd like to clarify, Mr. President,
Yes.
when we talk about regulating power generation versus the national government's national government's control and supervision of all sources of potential energy. Maybe you can clarify, Mr. President, the difference between control and supervision of the national government over sources of potential energy, as well as the other items mentioned, versus the authority to regulate power generation, which is in another section, Mr. President.
That is actually very simple. We came upon the concept, a new concept for us anyway, of island grid. And what does that mean? Island grid simply means that the generation of the power, the distribution of power, and the transmission of power, and the use of that power is all within an island. Now, that concept applies to non-islands, but wherein in a jurisdiction, the power is generated there, the power is distributed and transmitted within that jurisdiction, and the power is consumed within that jurisdiction. Then you can see that they are separate, and therefore to fall out of the monitoring of the national government. However, the moment that any of those conditions are changed, i.e., for example, if if the power generation in an area, in an island, grows so much that they have a surplus and they connect themselves to the national grid, they immediately come under the supervision and control and the monitoring of the ERC. That is the simple concept. If you are completely isolated in all regards, in generation, transmission, and use, then it can be administered locally. However, the moment that you are connected to the national grid, then it comes under the supervision of the national government. The contention was that the whole of Mindanao is an island grid because it is not in fact connected to, not physically connected to the national grid. However, that the concept is that is mistaken, in my view, simply because that is the Mindanao grid is still part of the national grid. It may not be directly connected by submarine cable, but the national that is part of the national grid that is supervised by the ERC and the National Power Corporation, and that's why we limited it only to power generated, transmitted, and consumed within the Bangsamoro government.
Right.
Bangsamoro region, sorry.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. President. Mr. President, as you can see, the line of questioning I have is really with regard to what the ARM currently has and what the BAR will have after if we pass this law. In the meantime, I would like to thank the gentleman for answering my questions, and Mr. President, we reserve the right to continue this line of questioning later on. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
It connects. Thank you very much to the gentleman from Tarlac for his interpolation.
Senator Teofisto Gingona is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would the distinguished sponsor yield to just one item? This with regards to the issue of the inland waters. As stated, what we're talking about here is the control over resources of the waters. As stated earlier, it's already been granted under the ARM law, the 9054, but it has been taken away from the Bangsamoro by the committee report. Mr. President, by way of background, I just would like to state that, for example, let's say the inland waters of the Bangsamoro have a very distinct historical and cultural dimension. This is not just legal. There's a historical and cultural dimension to it. For example, Lake Lanao. It would be inconceivable to tell a Maranao that you are a Maranao but you have no control over Lake Lanao. Maranao means people of the lake. Their identity as a people is so entwined with Lake Lanao. And so it would be as an analogy, Mr. President, it's something like telling a Filipino, you cannot wear barong Tagalog. It's inconceivable because it's intertwined with your identity, with your history, with your culture. And it's already been granted by 9054. Lastly, Mr. President, we're not talking here of jurisdiction to the exclusion of the national government. We're just talking here of, I think, in my opinion, primacy of jurisdiction. The national government still has jurisdiction, but primacy of jurisdiction. So would the distinguished gentleman be able to see that later on we could give...
Let me extend the gentleman's from Bukidnon's example. It would be like saying in your description, what we have done would be like telling an Ilocano, you have no control over Poway Lake, despite the fact that it is in Ilocos Norte. But the fact is, we do have control over Poway Lake because everyone that inhabits the surrounding areas are Ilocano. And the control is exercised by the municipalities. And therefore, the inhabitants of the area surrounding Lanao Lake will be the Maranao and through their local governments will have administrative control over will have administrative control over Lake Lanao.
Yes.
That is why we still continue to maintain that it will be the local population who control it. But we do it, instead of saying it will be the Bangsamoro government, we will maintain what is already granted by the local government code and say that the locals still control it, but through the local governments.
I agree with your committee report, Mr. President. That is the case. And all I'm saying that is that we're creating an entity here that is in between the national and the municipal.
Exactly, Mr. President.
And conceivably, the efforts of all the municipal governments within Lake Lanao, for example, need a very cohesive, coordinative body. And it would be logical to give it to the Bangsamoro. So, I think, Mr. President,
I'm sorry.
I think, Mr. President, that it does make a lot of sense to give the powers as over the resources to the Bangsamoro, rather than just relying on the different municipal governments.
Well, again, to go back to the experience of 9054, there was that overlap, and that's why there was some confusion, and that is why we decided to try and learn the lessons from that situation, which caused confusion and some conflict. But so that is why we did it that way. However, we have to remember that, as mentioned by Senator Bam earlier, there is going to be a fisheries code that is going to be written. There are going to be all kinds of laws that are going to be written in the Bangsamoro Parliament. If the Bangsamoro government and the Bangsamoro Parliament feel that there are functions that are not being sufficiently carried out by either the local government or the national government, and takes on that function, then that is well within the right of the Parliament to do. And as long, again, as it does not fall foul of national law, as long as it does not diminish in any way the powers of the local governments, then there would be no problem with the Bangsamoro Parliament enacting a law that would give them, the Bangsamoro government, powers and functions that they feel are not being properly attended to by the national government or the local. In other words, what they feel is falling between the cracks. Or maybe even they can say that the administration will be they will set up a system where there is closer coordination with the municipal governments. That there is some kind of body if they choose to do that. But in any case, if there is a gap in terms of the administration between the local governments and the national government, I see that that is a natural place for the Bangsamoro government to fill in and to perform those functions. Therefore, to be assured that this heritage of Lake Lanao and all the other inland waters is suitably administered and preserved.
But you do agree, Mr. President, that has already been granted under 9054.
Yes, and it was a problematic issue in the last few years that has no longer been implemented because of all the problems that it had raised.
Because one of the principles that we're trying to follow here is that what has been given already under 9054, whether it be problematic or not,
well,
cannot be diminished.
Well, let me remind all of us here that the very basis of all of this is the presumption, which I do not agree with, by the President that ARM is a failed experiment. And therefore, we must recognize what failures there are in there and not just blindly follow what ARM has done before. And if we see that there is a way to make it better, make it more streamlined, make the operation smoother, then I felt that this was a chance for us to do it.
I agree with you, Mr. President. Being that as it may, I still do not see the point of disengaging the identity of the inland waters from the Bangsamoro government. Maybe at a future time, Mr. President, we can discuss this further.
I would be happy to discuss privately or on the floor with the gentleman from Bukidnon the specifics on what the gentleman feels need to be attended to. As I said, this will be the function of the Bangsamoro government to impose their administrative functions wherever they feel fit, and so long as it is consistent with our laws and the Constitution, I cannot see that there would be any problem. I do not feel that there is in fact a removal from the cultural cultural patrimony of the locals, in this case the Maranaos, because, as I said, the administration will still belong to the Maranaos because it is the Maranaos who are in local government and making these decisions.
But in your case, in the committee report's case, it would be through the various municipal governments around the lake.
That is right, Mr. President, because that is what is mandated by RA 7160, the local government code.
Okay, I guess the points have been made, threshed out, but I would like to remind everyone that this document is not just a legal document, it is a political document, and to a certain extent it is a historical document that we are crafting here, and we must not just take into account the legal technical aspects of the law, but you must infuse into it the history and culture of the various peoples of the Bangsamoro. Thank you, Mr. President.
Certainly, Mr. President, I'm in full agreement with the gentleman that there is a very important political aspect to the basic law as we are discussing it now. And certainly, the political considerations have entered into much of our deliberations and discussions. I would be happy to continue those discussions with the gentleman on the detailed what he views as perhaps a disconnect that is going to be imposed upon the local culture, the local tribes, and that would not be consistent with their history and their culture. We would certainly not want to do that. In any way that we can improve that function, we would certainly be happy to include it in our bill.
So at some future time. For now, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gingona. Yes, Senator, the Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of the measure.
All right. Consideration of the measure is suspended. We request that this be calendar again tomorrow, and we do hope that there are our colleagues who would want to avail of the period of interpellation should be ready tomorrow.
Yes, Mr. President. Senator Soto wishes to make a manifestation.
Senator Soto is recognized. Well, the consideration of the measure is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the Chamber, I move to elect the Minority Leader, Senator Juan Ponce Enrile, to replace Senator J.V. Ejercito in his old position in the Commission on Appointments. That's all, Mr. President.
Senator Juan Ponce Enrile is elected representing the minority, in the Commission on Appointments in place of Senator J.V. Ejercito.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, there being no other business to take up, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, August 26, 2015.
Session is adjourned until 3 p.m. of Wednesday, August 26, 2015.